And the reason is it frees us up to start thinking a little differently. It frees us up to start thinking a little more critically about what we're gathering as information about someone learning something. Not everybody is learning only with e-learning. In fact, this company is a huge representative of that space of blended learning, where most of the training materials are outside of the e-learning world. E-learning is really a complement to training. It's not the whole thing. These kinds of things might have significance, these other pieces of learning. Tracking those, how they're being used, tracking a person's experience while they learn something, could lead to positive or negative results. It'll help us understand how people are learning and how that correlates to their job performance, which at the end of the day is the only thing that our clients really care about, really care about. They might say, oh, I need a score 1.2 compatible, but what they're really saying is, I need to know if the person taking this is going to do any better in their job. So there's no point in me spending money on it. The X API can be integrated into e-learning, just like SCORM. It can be integrated into in-class learning. It can be integrated into simulations, games, social media, performance support tools, feedback systems, knowledge base systems, etc. systems. It basically can be integrated into any device that is attached to a network. You can have a piece of hardware like a phone communicate with the Experience API and build useful data about someone using the phone. Maybe for the first time. Maybe how often they use the phone. Perhaps who they're calling. And it's simple. So integrates into anything, as long as it's attached to a network or has a wireless adapter capability, and it's simple. So this is why it's okay to dump the old, very convoluted standard that would take a developer a good year to get his head around, from a hand coding perspective, to something that you could probably figure out in an afternoon. And that's any of you. It's actually written in English, so it's really simple. Phenomenally simple. Not to say that you need things simple. Just from a programming perspective, you don't need to learn a new syntax. So what does the X API do? I've built this cloud of like, wow, it's all these things, but what the heck does it do? And how does it do it, really? The X API allows any digital entity to make statements in English about what someone's doing with it. Example, the phone. Tom picked up the phone. That's all it does. Noun, verb, object. This is the code of what you do with TinCan. You send a noun, a verb, and an object. Tom picked up the phone. It goes from one place to another. It goes from whatever device to another place, which is on a network. And the construct of that noun, verb, object sentence is, I did this. So, Rob drank water. I being the actor, or noun, did being the verb, and this being the object. Object being the activity, generally speaking, in e-learning terms. So with this construct, we can actually reproduce everything that SCORM did in a much simpler way. But we can also extend that to just about anything. Any verb can be used. Any noun can be used, and any activity can be used. Whether it's going to be useful right now or thrown away as garbage in a year, it doesn't really matter. You can collect more than you're ever going to use and have a great data set to deal with. But because everything's formatted exactly the same, the records can be analyzed very easily. More. I'll talk about its flexibility and simplicity. So, as far as a programming perspective, the flexibility of the X API is that it doesn't use a specific technology. it uses a specific transport protocol which is built into the internet. So any network, anywhere you are, can use this technology, so long as it can build a string in a language called JSON, which is really, really simple. Every computer can do it. And send a command via HTTP, which is what the internet does. So your phone can do it, your watch can do it, your cell phone camera can do it, your PDA, anything can do it. There's no LMS required. You don't even need to be on the internet, you just need a network. It can be internal, it doesn't have to be over the internet. The construct of the coding technology is actually really old school. It's a couple steps back from where we are now, which makes it great. It's not proprietary, no one owns it, it's just a standard, and anyone can do it. Old browsers, old tech, new tech, everything can do it. This frees us up to be able to host e-learning anywhere. It frees us up to be able to make statements about someone's usage of something from anything, anywhere. And I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. So the end all of this is, it's only a matter of time before WordPress, Joomla, all the Adobe products which already have it, Facebook, Yammer, Twitter, LinkedIn, start making TinCan statements. I was on a Google Hangout last night with a fella that was wearing the Google Glass headset that was making TinCan statements about our conversation. So Google's on board. It's going to be great. Our future is bright. But it's definitely an implementation, unlike Swarm, that will be implemented. So how does it apply to the 70-20-10 rule? It applies at all the levels. Now we've got an opportunity where on-the-job experience can be captured. Someone using a program or using a machine even, so long as that machine had the right pieces that could make the statements over the network. Any task that they do that involves some type of mechanism that can do the job, any kind of problem solving they have to go through, any kind of feedback system that they have, any kind of questions they've asked, any kind of things like that. Any kind of courses, obviously, and reading. You know, we can send TinCan statements from ebooks, launching an ebook, or even just buying it, getting it, acquiring it. Experience. The entire experience. Other things that you can do with it, a little lower level, are badges. This idea of giving accreditation to people at certain steps. These things can be calculated, build systems around that, but the API does support a system which allows you to gather accreditation or badges, which can be useful. Personal data lockers. This is kind of a construct that was built on top of the spec by Rusty Software, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. Basically, this is, in the world of TinCan API, you're sending all these statements, they're getting trapped into these large databases. You can have a personal data locker that susses out just the records that apply to you and your experience and keep those with you. You move to the next company, you can bring along your experience. Because the data is exactly the same format everywhere you go, that data can come with you. You keep your badges, you keep your experience, and your next HR gets a massive wealth of information about how you experience learning, which can be very, very useful. We don't know how yet, but it could be. And of course, once again, we're opening it back around. We're walking away from the requirement of having the LMS experience. In my personal opinion, LMS is always going to be required for e-learning. It's the organization factor of it. Courses, prescribed learning, learning paths, these are things that the API doesn't speak to. It only speaks to trapping experience statements. But you no longer require an LMS. So we're going to end up with a large big data pool of richer, deeper, more meaningful or meaningfuler information. I couldn't find a better word. And we're going to end up with lots of it. So the next step, one of the next opportunities in the industry from a technology perspective is, what do we do with all this gigantic information? It's all convoluted, they're very, very small, short things. The miners who get in on the ground floor and start making associations between how to filter that into useful buckets, making useful correlations out of that, that's the thought that has to come next, and that's a huge opportunity for the industry. That's a whole other bunch of it. So the LRS, touched on it a little bit. There's no LMS in TinCan, but there is an LRS. It stands for Learning Record Store. Basically, it's a database with the API sitting on top of it, so it can collect these statements from anywhere. Any piece of TinCan sending stuff needs to define an endpoint, which is that LRS, and then start sending its statements. That LRS is just a big bucket, everything goes inside.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Could an LMS send a TinCan statement to an LRS?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, flexibility. Another interesting point is an LMS can contain an LRS.
Aha.
There would be no login required, you just send statements to it, but it could contain an LRS, and on top of that, it could build on features of that LRS, like the reporting features and the data mining systems and such and such and such. So there's opportunity in the future. Its role essentially is storing learning records. Statements. Keep them. That's it. That's all it needs to do. Only records. There's no content in it. There's no user accounts. It doesn't care where the content was. If the statement made a point about where it was, it'll store that, but it doesn't care. And of course, built on top of an LRS, if you give it an interface, you could build reporting systems, management, and garbage collection, which is going to be an issue in the future with trillions of records growing exponentially annually. Garbage collection will be an important thing. Sharing, these personal data lockers, being able to move them from endpoint to endpoint. And of course, exporting these data sets in tiny little buckets for these data mining experiments that hopefully will start making some decent correlations that will make all our lives easier, better, make our product better. So that'll lead into big data. That's big data. Huge, lots of records, mining. I didn't rehearse this very many times. I hope it doesn't show. So this is the optional slide. I don't know. Do we have time? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So what's in a name? TinCan. We've got lots of names for this thing. TinCan Experience API, XAPI, TC API. So basically, why does it have so many names? It began as basically a project, a research project from the Department of Defense in the States. They farmed it out to the ADL, which is a group that they have created to deal with learning and distribution of learning. And the ADL hired Rusty Software, or gave the project to, and a massive grant, to Rusty Software, who basically is the leader in implementing SCORM at the time. And they said, here's what we want. We want flexible. We want to be able to make tracking from anywhere. And we want to track more than just e-learning. So a bunch of those guys sat down in the field, drank some beers around a fire, and decided, we're going to make an open JSON API, RESTful service, and we're just going to do it. And we'll be able to do this in 6 months. We'll build a community, and it'll be fun. The owner of Rusty Software said, let's call it Project TinCan. Like the tin cans with the string, because you're talking from anywhere to anywhere. He kind of likes it. So he says, okay, we'll call it Project TinCan. Every project needs a name. This is a new world. April 1st, it became a standard. It went from a project to a standard. Rusty Software decided to call that standard, without really justifying it in any way, the TinCan API, versus ADL's whatever they want to use. The ADL decided, we're going to call it the Experience API. Because we have international customers, we want to cater this to the world, and people in Singapore won't get the TinCan thing. It's going to sound like it's broken. It's a rusty can. And he said, no, it's everyone knows TinCan. The community wants to call it TinCan. And the community said, hang on, we've done some research. Christie Software owns a copyright on TinCan API, which they claim that they are going to give to the ADL as soon as the DoD allows it to happen, which will never happen. And then the community comes back and says, well, we did some more digging, and well, it's okay, because Christie Software also owns the ExperienceAPI.com and Storm.com. In fact, they own them all. The ADL doesn't own those copyrights. Christie has always had Storm.com. That's their website, Storm.com. Now, TinCanAPI.com and ExperienceAPI.com both lead to their website. This causes a conflict. It may appear as though they own this standard. They do not. It is free to use.